Ravi stood at the edge of his land, boots heavy with morning dew, eyes scanning rows of brittle wheat that had failed him again. The golden fields that once fed his family were now shadows of themselves, sun-scorched, half-grown, and barely alive. For the third year in a row, the monsoon had come late and left too early, and the soil, overworked and underfed, refused to cooperate. The bank's letter weighed in his pocket like a stone. He had 60 days to repay the loan or surrender his land. His father's land. His grandfather's pride. Selling it would mean more than just giving up soil. It meant losing identity. Neighbors whispered about leaving for the city. Others had already gone. But Ravi wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. One evening, desperate for direction, he rode his motorcycle to a nearby village where an agricultural seminar was being held. It was mostly younger farmers, eyes bright with curiosity and quiet skepticism. A middle-aged man named Arun took the MIC. He spoke of hybrid corn, resilient, fast-growing, and high-yielding. "I replaced my wheat with maize," he said, holding up a photo of golden cobs as long as his forearm. "It saved my farm." Ravi listened, skeptical. Corn wasn't traditional here, but neither was failure. Back home, he spent nights researching. Hybrid seeds, crop rotation, drip irrigation. He scribbled notes by lantern light, ran numbers, calculated risk. He met with Arun, who showed him his farm. Rows of healthy green stalks swayed in the wind, thick with promise. It was a gamble, but less than the gamble of doing nothing. Ravi sold his old tractor for seed money. He cleared his fields, laid new irrigation lines, and, with trembling hands, planted corn. The village watched in silence, some with pity, others with quiet hope. Weeks passed. Shoots emerged, strong and green. Then stalks. Then cobs. By mid-season, his field shimmered like a sea of gold under the sun. He walked through it every morning, brushing leaves with reverence. The numbers told the rest. This harvest, he'd tripled last year's yield. But it wasn't just about money. Something shifted in Ravi. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was learning, adapting, thriving. When young farmers approached him with questions, he shared everything he knew. The farmer who once stood at the edge of failure now stood at the center of a quiet revolution. That year, Ravi repaid the bank in full and had enough left to reinvest. He installed a weather monitoring system, started experimenting with intercropping, and even offered small loans to 2 neighboring farmers to try corn themselves. As his field swayed in the wind, Ravi felt a sense of pride he hadn't known in years. Not because he saved the land, but because he changed with it. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't just a comeback. It was a beginning. Aisha had never seen rice growing outside of pictures. In her village, nestled at the edge of a semi-arid plain, people laughed at the idea. Rice needs rain, they said. It drowns in water, not thirst. But laughter couldn't pay school fees or fill empty plates. Widowed at 34, with 2 children and a crumbling acre of land, Aisha knew desperation more intimately than most. She had tried millet, then sorghum, each harvest thinner than the last. The skies were growing quieter, the rain stingier. The earth cracked sooner with each passing year. Still, she rose before dawn, pulling water from the shallow well, sowing hope into the hardened soil. Everything changed when she overheard a radio broadcast while selling vegetables at the market. A women's farming group was offering training on a new rice technique that used 60% less water. She wrote down the number on the back of a matchbox. Skepticism greeted her at the first meeting. The others were younger, some more educated. But the instructor, a gentle-voiced woman named Lila, welcomed her like family. She spoke of SRI, the system of rice intensification. Fewer seeds, wider spacing, alternate wetting and drying instead of constant flooding. Most shocking of all, she said the roots would grow stronger. Back home, Aisha dug a small test plot. She aligned the rows with thread and tied her scarf against the dust. Every movement felt uncertain. But something in her shifted, an old resilience stirring beneath the surface. Weeks later, green shoots rose, firm and upright. She counted the tillers, more than double what Millet had ever given her. With a borrowed mobile phone, she took photos, tracked her watering, and sent updates to Lila. By mid-season, the rice shimmered like a lake of hope. When harvest came, Aisha wept. Her yield was 3 times her last sorghum crop, enough to sell, store, and eat. For the first time in years, her children had rice in their lunchboxes, something they used to see only in books. Word spread. Neighbors visited. Some still doubted, but others watched closely. One older man muttered, "She's growing rain without the sky." Aisha didn't just keep farming. She taught. She hosted field visits, translated technical terms into the local dialect, and shared her mistakes openly. The barren land no longer defined her. She had bent it, reshaped it, coaxed life where none was supposed to grow. Her small field became more than a rice patch. It became proof. That change was possible. That old rules could be rewritten. That 1 acre, in the hands of a woman with nothing left to lose, could feed a movement. And as she walked through a field at dusk, fingers brushing the grain-heavy stalks, she thought of her husband and the life they'd lost. Then she smiled, because what she had now was growing. Carlos had never seen himself as a farmer. At 19, with callous hands and a restless heart, he spent most days hauling cement on construction sites in the city outskirts. The pay was low, the hours long, and the future blurry at best. His mother's backyard sat abandoned, choked with weeds and forgotten tools. Once, it had been a garden. Now it was just another reminder of what used to be. The turning point came on a Tuesday. Carlos returned home early, dismissed after contractor skipped town without paying wages. At the local community hall, a youth program offered free lunch and something else, a workshop on value crops. He stayed for the food, but the words hooked him. Tomatoes, the speaker said, pointing at a slide. High yield, fast turnaround, local demand. You don't need acres, just initiative. Carlos barely listened at first. But then she mentioned greenhouse farming, plastic tunnels that could be built using recycled materials and bamboo. No need for perfect soil. Just sunlight, structure, and care. The idea followed him home. That night, he walked into the backyard with a flashlight and saw not a ruin, but a blank canvas. With borrowed tools and online tutorials, he cleared the yard. Old window panes became his greenhouse walls. He patched the roof with tarp. The neighborhood kids watched from the fence, snickering at first, then helping. Carlos planted his first tomato seedlings in neat rows. He learned about pruning, spacing, and organic pest control. When a fungal blight threatened his crop, he brewed garlic sprays from his kitchen. He lost a few plants, but saved most. By the second month, vines began to flower. The scent of damp earth and green growth filled the air. Every morning, he inspected each plant like a sculptor studying his work. He wasn't just growing tomatoes. He was growing belief. His first harvest surprised even him. Bright red, plum tomatoes filled 2 crates. He took them to the local market, expecting a shrug. Instead, a vendor offered him a weekly contract. Later, a small ketchup producer asked for samples. The news spread. People stopped calling him the dropout and started calling him the tomato guy. His story wound its way into WhatsApp groups, youth circles, and even the town's mayor's speech on local innovation. With the profits, Carlos bought better seeds, expanded his structure, and hired 2 friends. One of them had dropped out of school. Now he was saving to return. Carlos built shelves for books in the same room he once used for storage. He hadn't just built a greenhouse. He'd built a reason to stay. And as he stood beneath the sun, pruning vines that reached for the light, Carlos realized something. You didn't need to leave home to find success. Sometimes, you just needed to grow it. Davika had spent most of her life watching others make plans. Her own days were quiet routines, morning tea, tending goats, folding old clothes that no longer fit anyone. Since her husband's passing, she'd become invisible in the eyes of her village. Too old to work, too proud to beg. The one thing she still had was a land. 2 acres of dry soil, hardened with neglect and memory. Her sons had moved away, sending money occasionally, but never enough. Neighbors assumed she'd eventually lease the plot or let it go wild. But Davika wasn't done. It was a passing conversation at the health center that sparked the idea. A young agricultural officer, scribbling notes beside her, mentioned sunflowers, low maintenance, resilient, and marketable for oil and seed. He said they could thrive in poor soil, even with minimal water. They bloom where most things give up, he added. Davika took it to heart. That week, she walked her land for the first time in months, dragging her fingers through the dust. She bought sunflower seeds with what remained of her savings and planted them herself, row by crooked row. Her neighbors watched, first amused, then perplexed. Each morning, she watered with a hand pump and spoke softly to the soil, as if coaxing it back to life. Weeks passed. Green sprigs broke through like shy guests. Then, color. Bursts of yellow unfurled in every direction, golden faces stretching toward the sun. Passers-by began to stop. Children peered through fences. Tourists, on their way to nearby temples, paused to take photos. Davika watched them from her veranda, apron dusted with soil, eyes shining like the blooms themselves. The sunflowers did more than turn heads. They brought income. A local cooperative offered to buy the seeds for oil extraction. An artisan approached her to use the dried petals and organic dyes. By harvest season, her 2 acres had yielded more than just profit. They had restored her place in the village. Davika used part of the earnings to install a small seating area among the flowers. On weekends, families came to walk the paths. She served spiced tea under a canvas shade. What started as survival had become something beautiful. Children who once raced past her home now waved and called her Adji, grandmother. Some asked to learn how to plant their own sunflower beds. One evening, a young girl sat beside her and asked, "Why sunflowers?" Davika smiled. "Because they follow the light," she said, "even when the world turns dark." She never imagined a field could change her story. But there it was, in full bloom, a final chapter rewritten, not with struggle, but with color. And as the sun dipped low and her flowers turned their golden faces westward, Davika felt the quiet certainty of something she hadn't known in years. Hope grows back.